are recording to the.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Commissioners of Jefferson County Public Utility District. Today is Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022. It is now 3 p.m. With the adoption by the Washington State Legislature of ESHB 1329, providing for both virtual and in-person meetings to be held, Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. In-person attendance will be limited to provide sufficient space, and masking is encouraged. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. I'd now like to determine that we have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners. I am Kenneth Collins, Commissioner District 2 and Chair of the Board.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner District 1.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next order of business is review of the agenda and hopefully approval thereof. Any revisions to the agenda? Edits? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, our agenda has been approved. We have on our agenda 3 executive sessions. We will be sequentially adjourning for executive session and then rejoining the general meeting and then adjourning again. So the first executive session per RCW 42.30.110, Section 1, subsection B, to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of decreased price. How much time do we need for this discussion?
5 minutes.
Wow.
We can go 10 max.
Or let's say 10 minutes. I have 3:01, so 3:11 will be back in the general session, albeit briefly.
We're all set.
Okay, good. We have concluded the first of 3 closed meetings of the board. The second meeting, which will commence shortly, per RCW 42.30.140, Section B, to discuss union negotiations. How much time do we anticipate needing?
15 minutes and Melanie will join us.
Okay, so it is now 3:13, so that'll bring us to 3:28. Very good. We have just concluded the second of 3 executive sessions. We're about to adjourn for the last executive session per RCW 42.30.110, Section I, subsection, I believe that's subsection J or small I. Wait a minute. Subsection 1, subsection I. That's what it looks like. Close enough. To discuss with legal counsel litigation to which the PUD is likely to become a party. How much time do we need?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. So it is 3:29 now approximately 3:45. We have concluded the third executive session. I would like us to, for the moment, skipping public comment until 4 o'clock. I'd like us to consider the consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that anyone wants to remove for more discussion?
No, I'm okay with it.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I will second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as written, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Consent agenda has been approved. Let's move ahead with manager and staff reports.
Kevin, did you want me to go or did you want to say something first or? You're muted.
We're gonna have to do the consent agenda.
Oh, okay, we didn't get that on the record. Okay, apparently we did not get on the record the approval of the consent agenda. I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
The motion to approve the consent agenda has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 And for
The consent agenda has been approved.
And for those out there wondering what's going on, this is our first meeting in this room and we're working through some technical glitches with the audio system. So if we're doing things multiple times or a little confused, that's what's going on. It's like the first outing of a
Shakedown
new
cruise.
boat. We got a shakedown cruise going on here. Exactly.
So, manager and staff reports. Mr. Manager.
Annette's going to start out and review the calendar. We have a lot of calendar events in the next 2 months.
Somebody tuning in, I believe, needs to put themselves on mute because we're getting an echo.
I don't know who will be able to fix it.
Annette, go ahead and jump in.
Okay,
Start re-
good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to actually see everybody in the same room. So we're going to go over the calendar of meetings for August and September. And I've already seen one where we need to maybe add something. So if you have that in front of you, we can go over. Do you want to go line by line? Or do you just want to take it as it is and then go over any questions that you might have with whatever line item? Should we go over line by line? Will that take too long or is that okay?
Ones I had questions on were the joint city meeting thing, I think. Does anybody else have questions about any of the other items? I mean, everything else is kind of on our schedule anyway.
Okay. The only other thing that I sort of caught today, because I remembered that it comes up the second Monday of every month, is the CAB meeting. I know that we don't have one for August. However, I don't know about September. And if we do, it will be scheduled for the 12th. So,
What's that?
You're next up for the cab.
Yeah, and I guess we'll know after our next special meeting what's happening with the cab, so.
okay, so I just wanted to bring that up as a proposed.
Right.
And then, okay, so Jeff, to talk about then, are you talking about the joint meeting with the port?
Correct.
And the city, okay, so I wrote and read to the last revision that I sent you out yesterday. I hope you will have that. They have proposed 2 dates, although they were leaning towards one more than the other. The 2 proposals were September 12th at 6:30 PM. And then September 23rd at 5 PM. They were leaning more towards the September 23rd date.
Hmm.
So I'll be in town on the 23rd at Waputa in Spokane.
So the-
Right, and
On that one, get my calendar at the right
And
spot.
This,
So that would be a 5 o'clock. Would you be able,
Yeah, I would assume,
of course, yeah,
I would assume that Waputa will be done by noon that day, but I'll be
Yeah.
traveling would be the thing,
just
so.
depending on where
From
the,
Spokane, so yeah, I would probably
Be on
pretty
the road.
be on the road, so.
okay. How would you feel?
we can propose different dates to, they will take them to their council similar to this meeting. So if we
No.
have a couple of dates that work better, let's propose.
I mean, the 12th is okay. I mean, I have other stuff earlier in the day, but late in the day on the 12th, right? Is that the same meeting or is that,
That's
That-
the same meeting.
yeah.
it's the same meeting.
Yeah, I can't do the morning one. I've got a really hard to reschedule doctor's appointment for the morning, but I could do the 6:30 on the 12th.
Yeah, even though that's a cab day, if we do it late, if that
Right.
means late,
So-
we still could do it.
Right.
The time on the 12th would be
6:30 PM.
Well, I think it's practical in the 23rd. At least all 3 of us can do it.
Okay,
Yeah, that's normally a city council meeting night
It is, and they would try to work us in the port in.
to a regular scheduled meeting where they, okay, that's cool.
I did talk to the city and they're willing to look at dates.
Yeah,
So if it works better for us, different times and dates, we can come up with a couple, throw it back to them and see what happens.
Yeah, but September's pretty busy on my calendar, so.
what about doing, I mean, Ken, how would you feel? How do you feel about 6:30 on the 12th? Is that too late
Well, it's not quite past my bedtime.
for you? Because I mean, I could totally see them doing it. They would just put it on their agenda for that night. And then when they got to that point, say, okay, now we're going into this meeting. What they probably don't want to
Oh,
add it to their.
I'm fine with that.
I'm just interested in doing this sooner than later because really all it's gonna be, I think, is just a report, literally. And
They may ask for action. They were hoping that in this joint meeting, if everyone agreed, we would take action to move the project forward.
right, but that still is subject to permits and review and everything else, but yeah. So action is incremental action at best. Well, so the only one that doesn't work for me is the 12th in the morning, but the other dates work for me. And
Now,
what do
the
you guys
12th
want to
in
say?
the morning does not work for me.
12th in the evening.
12th in the evening or 23rd?
Yeah, the 23rd I won't make, so.
Okay.
The 12th and late in the day works for me. I have a meeting with the fire chiefs at 9 and then a cab meeting is that day, but that'll be your
Okay,
cab meeting.
well,
if it's-
I guess that's our feedback is to ask them if they could work that into the regular meeting on Monday night.
Well, Dan, actually, you'll be sitting still on the ferry line.
No.
How are you
okay.
planning on?
No, I'll be driving around.
All right. Well,
So you got that, Annette?
you'd be going
Yes,
slower.
so what I'm hearing is that we'll keep the September 12th at 6:30. We'll propose that back to them as something that'll work for you to attend. And then just keep in mind, there might be a cab meeting earlier that day, but that's still tentative. There wasn't anything in the morning on the 12th. I didn't know what that meant, Jeff, when you were saying that, because I don't have anything for the morning on the 12th.
We have fire chiefs, Kevin and I have fire
12th is no
chiefs.
good.
Okay, well, that one I didn't have on here because I didn't think all 3 of you attended, so.
Either. So the evening of the 12th is the only date that works for us. And if that doesn't work for them, then you got to come back to us and start over
Right.
again.
I'm kind of used to that. We can do that. So I will take off the 23rd then, or at least let them know that that one won't work, but that we prefer the 12th. Was there anything else on here? Because this is a pretty intense schedule, as you know, for the next 2 months. Is there anything else on here that that doesn't look right or that you need to change or?
Yeah, the meeting on the August 18th, the ICG meeting, you've got it as virtual, and I don't think that meeting is virtual.
I think the city manager did propose getting together someplace. He talked about a tent,
Yeah.
San
and-
Juan or
and,
something.
It would not have the capability for
Yeah.
being a hybrid meeting.
So I think location to be determined on that one. You might want to just
Okay,
say that. And then on the meeting with the city, I think how you've described it, we should probably change to, it's, what does it say? Poplar tree meeting with Portland City. And in reality, this is a project that involves lots of things more than just trees. So I would prefer it just say Sims Way project meeting with Portland City. Future references.
okay.
Go.
So Mr. Street, any additional reports?
There are a couple things on our calendar that I need to talk about a little bit. NRECA Region 9 is in Portland this year in September. I'm going to attend, and the commissioners, you may want to look at attending that down in Portland.
What's the dates on that, Kevin?
Into September, I believe there's a week left for registration. And Mike Bailey can send something out to you, but it is with the RUS organizations. I went right before COVID, and it's a lot of it is managers and boards, commissioners getting together, talk about how to present at meetings, that kind of thing. So something to look at.
So that's primarily cooperatives. We're one of the very few PUDs that are members of that organization. What exactly is it that we're looking for out of that?
So
September 27th through the 29th.
when we talk about the Reconnect grant and some of the USDA broadband opportunities, that's all RUS. So that's why it really does apply to us. Also, on our electric side, we are required to use RUS building standards, construction standards. We can modify them a little bit, but a lot of what we do, even though we're not a co-op, because we borrowed the money from RUS, we have to follow their rules.
Also some just best practice things.
Do they have the information about the conference too, like the courses and what
Yes.
exactly? So we would, because you said there's only a week left on registration, and I just went to their site and I'm not finding, maybe I'm just not looking.
There's a notice that came through email
Okay,
about the conference.
okay, I'll track it down.
Mr. Street, further report?
And then one other thing pertaining to broadband, we are looking at going, well, why don't you tell them about going across the water real quick?
Oh, we're looking at going to Whidbey Telecom. We've met some of the folks working at Whidbey Telecom. They're looking to create a training program along with the Fiber Broadband Association for fiber technicians. Since we're going to be in the market to hire and train some of those positions, we're going to go visit their operation, talk with them, and talk about opportunities to do a joint training program. That'll be on August 19th.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah. And then I think we're at the next meeting, I wanted to make you all aware, we're going to look at a revision for our wholesale rates, where we're going to add a new class of rates for active Ethernet customers. And we'll bring the first touch to the next board meeting.
And
Wanna
thank
make
you
you all
for the
aware.
explanation as to what active Ethernet meant.
Oh, sure.
So how many customers do we expect will fall into this category?
Currently, we have about 45 customers that are already connected with that style of internet connection. And right now, we only have equipment to continue building in that manner. But once we have our pond equipment in the next month, then all new customers, or the majority of new customers will be pond connections.
Any estimate on the impact to those customers? Is it going to be a wide range? Are they the same size, same amount of connections? Again, exactly how will it affect each individual?
We will probably have a very small growth in active Ethernet customer connections over the next 4 years. And we will have a 4,000 plus in pond connections. And when we designed our rates, we designed them mainly for retail pond rates, and we adjusted the wholesale rates to reflect it, but we need to have another category for active Ethernet.
So I guess rather than a dollar amount, is there a percentage of increase that we expect it will be to existing customers? Obviously, the new customers will get the new rate.
I hate to call it an increase because our old rates were for active Ethernet connections. And then we created new rates for PON, but they're a lot lower. We also have rates for what are called VLAN, virtual connections. And those are much, much higher. Those are more similar to the type of service we're providing now. But we want to have an in-between rate. And that's what we're working up with Doug Dawson.
So what if I'm hearing that it won't be a large increase, then it could be a reduction possibly, or to some customers, or what exactly? I'm trying to get my head wrapped around of what the impact financially will be to those customers.
There's not going to be initially any impact to the customers that are currently connected. If we connect any more customers with an active Ethernet connection, we need to charge them at the rate that it cost us to provide the service, which is what we're not doing in the present since we had revised our rates.
So just like our construction rates and new growth pays for new growth.
Yeah, we're charging them for the construction connection, but not for the amount that it costs to keep up that service. It takes a dedicated fiber and a dedicated port, which is a huge asset to the end user.
Thank you.
So I'd now like to go back to item 6 on our agenda, which is public comment. And the public comment period allows members of the public to comment, surprisingly, limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the chair and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the chair, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. So I would now like to recognize there's an individual with his or her hand up with phone number. What are
246.
246? That might be Roger Risley. Please go ahead.
Roger, you're currently muted.
You're still muted.
Harry, my bad. Got it now?
Got it. Loud and clear.
Thanks. Yeah, regarding an item that came up on our construction project, 2 items, the cross-country feed to Port Ludlow substation and the Breaker Lane double circuit, totaling $560,000. 3 questions. Did PLA request these projects? What are the timelines for these projects? And given the way the law reads, what's our legal rationale for proceeding? Thank you.
Real quick, these are projects that were internal to the PUD. No external sources came and asked about to do these. And the driving force is we have loading issues in that area. So they're PUD projects. They're for all customers in that area, not specific to PLA.
And Kevin, haven't we had, because my parents used to live down that way, and isn't there issues that when one of, I can't remember if it's one of the substation goes down or what the issue is, you've only been able to push power so far. And is that kind of the issue by this other link? Then we can serve a broader area from when one of the substations goes down. Is that kind of the issue?
Not only a broader area, we can pick people up quicker during outages. We can move loads around that. Right now, we have to do certain projects just during the summer because we can't move the load around how we do it. So operationally, specifically during the winter, without some of these upgrades, not only there, but some other projects, we just really have to have them to operate the system efficiently.
Okay, and the area affected is much larger than Port Ludlow, the master planned area.
Even, so if you think about it, if we can feed Port Ludlow a little bit different, it frees up capacity for Indian Island and Maristone. You know, we're all intertied through the substation. So every main feeder that we can beef up or rebuild, it gives our whole system capacity.
Okay, thank
not
you.
Just Port Ludlow.
Thank you.
The individual whose last three digits of their phone number are 196, please go ahead. Looks like you're muted. Not hearing anything.
Can
Yes.
you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Yes, this is Deb Lawrence, and I have property at 713 Middle Point. I do have existing power there, and I need to get another line from where the basically get it extended further down, another line further down my property. It's not on the road. And what I'm hearing is I need to pay for and put in a communication conduit, which will not even get used. So I understand that you guys are trying to put in communication and internet, and I believe that your interest in getting a conduit put in during construction is so it's already in the road in case someone requests it. But this is on private property, not public. It's not on a road. So I think you need to modify your requirement that this be put in everywhere, because it serves no purpose in my situation.
I have a question for Kevin. Is there a process where if somebody can make the case that this never ever would be used, that you can grant exceptions to our requirements? And I don't know what the facts are in this one.
We're really looking strongly at this process right now. The conduit that we have requested for the last several years is not just for PUD, but it's for Wave, CenturyLink. Anyone can use that conduit. So most of the time we've tried to hold firm on not making an exception because they're putting the power in now. And if we start making exceptions, they split the property. It's an ADU today, but it's a separate home tomorrow. How do we get internet to them? So we can look at some options, but in the past, we've tried to stick to the policy that the customer has to do it. Almost all of these customer services are on private property because the transformer sits out on the corner of the property and they take the secondary to their house or the primary to a transformer and then your house. So the dig once rules work well for 80–90% of our customers, but the rest of the customers, there is a question whether they should or shouldn't, but we have as staff held pretty firm to make them install the conduit at this time.
Okay, and I don't, are you familiar with this one?
I'm not familiar with this one, but
Is-
I will be tomorrow.
Okay, and anybody, but they can put in writing or whatever format they feel appropriate to ask for an exception. That's something they can do so you can know what the circumstances are.
They can ask for an
Okay.
exception.
Okay, there we go.
And I guess it would depend on whether the parcel is being developed for a utility building or for residential.
I mean, if I
It's
suppose-
private property for residential, and actually, I already got part of the conduit in. So to make that requirement to me now, I would have to go back and redo everything. And it's not going to get used. I do not need communications. And it would not end at the road where this dig is going to take place. It would just be an empty conduit with no connection on either end. It's really, and it would cost me a significant amount of money, to the point where I might consider not even going totally solar.
So
If
Can
I,
can you try and contact our general manager tomorrow and discuss this in greater detail?
did leave a message today with Kenneth Collins, but I haven't, obviously it was today, so I didn't have time to return my call. And I just heard about this. I just need my existing power extended to another building. It's so putting in a 1-inch conduit requirement is going to just be a total waste.
So what I'm suggesting is that you speak with and this is Kenneth Collins speaking. I'm suggesting that you contact our general manager and discuss your concerns in detail with him tomorrow.
And who is the general manager?
Street.
I'm sorry, I'm missing this conversation.
Yep. Well, I've got your number and I will make sure that Mr. Street will get in touch with you tomorrow so you can discuss this in detail. It's really at a level that the board tries to discuss and formulate policy. This is really the practical application of policy, and Mr. Street would be the most appropriate person to have that conversation with.
That's fine, but the reason I'm in this mess is because of your policy that you guys authorized or are requiring. And I understand when you're putting power along the road that, I would agree with what you're doing, but not when it comes on private property.
So we need to move forward, and the best approach is to have a conversation with Mr. Street and
And do you have his phone number?
he'll contact you. You left a message for me. I will relay your phone number to him and he will get in touch with you. So
All
there are
right.
other,
But I would think in the future, when you're making policy, that you be more specific of what
I'm
situation that applies to.
3 minutes. And we've gone way over 3 minutes. I appreciate your concern, but we need to forward. We have a number of things to cover yet this evening. So I'm
I-
asking that you respect our 3-minute limit. I've given you an alternative. Mr. Street will contact you tomorrow. You can discuss this in detail with him. Thank you. Mr. Tiersch, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you. A couple of real quick things that some open public meetings things that I just noticed. First, I noticed on your printed agenda that there was a reference for one of your executive sessions to an item that did not seem to be particularly applicable. And I think you corrected it when you spoke the subsection of the Public Meetings Act that you were using to go into executive session, but the printed version on the agenda is incorrect. And so that's, it's a technical problem, but it is a problem. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be accurate 24 hours before your meeting. The other thing is in HB 1329, the new changes to the Open Public Meetings Act, it's made clear that you need to provide for public comment prior to any item on the agenda on which you're taking final action. And that includes things like the motion to approve the consent agenda. And for this meeting, you didn't do that. So it's a technical thing, but I would request that you pay attention to it for the future so that you don't have any of these small missteps. The last thing I wanted to mention right now is the mics in your conference room. They seem to be working really well, and you guys are coming through nice and clear. However, the mics appear to be very sensitive to distance, and they're highly directional, so that, for example, when Kevin Street leans back and starts answering or having a discussion, he kind of fades out. So this is one of the things that if you review and listen to the recording of this meeting, you'll see exactly how this works. And I think it'll help you improve your mic usage. But I just wanted to point it out right now, because some of the stuff that's being discussed is kind of fading out into the background. So appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Thanks for the feedback, Tom. What was that RCW you referenced regarding public meetings in the public comment section?
4230.110 sub I, sub 1 sub I, not sub L. The agenda listed sub L, which is not at all what you were
No,
doing.
that wasn't the nature of the question.
Question was about, you said that we didn't do public comment in the right order, and I thought you cited an RCW.
I didn't, but I cited a House bill, which was HB 1329. That was one of the changes that was made and became effective about middle of the year. Actually, that has now been codified in RCW 4230-240.
Thank you very much.
And the difference that would make is that we need to ask for public comment before we vote on the consent agenda.
Yes, that's how it's been interpreted before any item on which final action is to be taken. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Durgan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to make comment on the intent, it appears, of the PUD to fund broadband through electrical ratepayers. I think that's pretty inappropriate. Broadband should stand on its own through either grant money or fees charged to the broadband customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? I'm not seeing any hands up. Looking once, looking twice.
Hey, Ken, can I ask a question of the general manager related to that public comment?
Yes.
So I got an email too from Annette Hankey about this issue, and it's been stated at our meetings several times that broadband is being subsidized by other lines. And I just wanted to get clear from my perspective of what you're operating under for the budget. So I don't know if it's last year or the last 2 years, we have basically said we want to allocate the property tax revenue towards this line of business, and that we knew we needed some money for matches and other things, and while we go after grants. Realizing that a budget period is fluid and you're waiting for grant monies to come in, is that still the basis of how you're operating the broadband budget? That basically you've got that amount of money to work with at the end of the day or at the end of the budget cycle, and everything else is basically coming from grants? Or is there some other way that this is being looked at? Or
So for broadband budget, it's looked at in a couple different ways. We get money from the tax revenues. We get money from our partnership with NOAANET and the people who have connections here already.
so we do have some revenue coming in.
Yep. we do.
Okay.
We do have some electrical funds that goes towards building fiber.
But that's
which-
related to electrical utility infrastructure.
Correct. It's
Okay.
to connect substations, it's to connect
Sure.
line gear. Some of the work we're doing on the metering, we put some fiber connections in there. So some revenues do come out of the electric funds. We also are spending some reserve funds for broadband and broadband material. They do come out of electrical, but those funds will be reimbursed to us. You know, if you remember back several months, we approved about $1 million worth of fiber. That was paid through reserves, but it is part of a grant opportunity that we get reimbursed for.
So that's really a cash flow issue, that we don't have the money from the state yet. So you've got to buy it now and it'll be paid back through.
Correct.
The grant money.
And a lot of what we're doing is work that we do get reimbursed for from the state or the federal government. I do want everyone to know, though, this is no different than when we took over the electrical, the water PUD funded a ton of stuff till electrical was up and running and could support itself. The same type of deal. The Joel's time, for example, was being paid for out of water revenue. We will have some electrical revenues going to broadband, but have in the revenue stream in 3 years, broadband will be cash positive, and then that goes away. So,
But I guess right now, the main thing, the money outside of the NOAANET money and so forth, and money outside of what's going to get paid back because of cash flow issues, is primarily that roughly 550,000 or whatever of property taxes that we have said can go towards broadband.
closer to $1 million.
It's $1 million now?
No, the tax revenues are 500,000.
Right.
But then in our 4-year work plan, there's 150,000 for SCADA projects.
Right, right.
There's from knowing that we get.
I guess when I'm saying broadband, I'm saying broadband that's not serving the electrical utility.
It is so intertwined. Yes, I can say 500,000. We will have to do some matching funds, but again, once the revenues start coming in within 3 years, that comes back to the PUD as revenue.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that, my understanding on it.
Commissioner Tupper.
So this is part of a conversation that's been going on for a long time. And then all along the way, I've insisted that we have some sort of accounting for the broadband related costs so that we can track them in real time, in real numbers to the grant monies to take that money in to cover the electric cost. I think part of Mr. Durgan's comment was probably aimed at the comment that Commissioner Collins made at the CAB meeting about the electric division. I forget Ken's exact terminology, having to back or cover the broadband for 3 or 4 years. I'm not exactly sure what his terminology was. I think that's probably what the concern is that what does that really mean and how are we going to account? So that when and if we get the grant money, because right now we have how much grant money have we taken? How much has come in?
We've been awarded $23 million.
How much have we actually though been taken?
But
Right. So this is the point, is I think that we need to have an accurate accounting as we move along so that there isn't any sort of discussion about, well, the electric rates are paying for broadband. We need, again, my position all along has been the two need to be kept separate as best we can. I realize there's going to be some commingling of SCADA, fiber is going to be commingled for other uses, outside of just the SCADA. So that being understood, that there will be some shared cost that the electric department will incur, that we do keep it separate, that the accounting for broadband really needs to be at a high level.
So if I understand correctly, we're taking money out of reserves now for matching funds to get the broadband off the ground or under the ground, as the case may be. And ultimately, fingers crossed, when broadband is making money, that will go back in to replenish our reserves. And we are not anticipating any increase to the electric rates in order to subsidize the broadband division. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
So I'm not seeing any additional hands up. So why don't we move forward with commissioner reports, and Commissioner Tupper, please go ahead.
Thank you. I got a pretty short report. So I attended the, let me see here, the BPA provider of choice, BPA concept paper workshop on July 21st. Manager Street also was on that call, so he can correct me if I get anything wrong, maybe. BPA Director John Harrison said that the tiered rate system will be retained by BPA. So the tier 1, tier 2, they're planning on retaining that the way it's set up, similar to the way it's set up now. They expect to set, or maybe you could say reset, the system size at around 7,000 average megawatts, which they would likely reformulate the contract high water marks using a different year or length of term of years to figure out how that would work. And there's some risk involved with what BPA is putting forward. I don't want to get into the weeds, but it's a percentage that they look at, and it's a more riskier percentage for the utilities, the way they want to do it, than what the industry put forward to BPA. We were looking like a 10 percentile, and they're looking at like a 35% percentile, which raises the risk for us. It's hard to get into the weeds. I don't want to try and explain it, but that's so maybe somewhere in between there'll be, an average. I don't know. It depends on what BPA wants to do. So the contract stuff, it's moving forward pretty aggressively. They're proposing 20-year contract duration, which I don't think there's any surprise to anybody there. They want, longer is more secure for everybody involved in their way of looking at it. Some are still pushing for quote unquote off ramps, but it doesn't look like there will be any quote unquote off ramps. Everybody will get the same contracts and the same type of products out of the contract. There'll be some small differences depending on certain utilities, but that's kind of the way it's looking at the moment. And he also reaffirmed that he is in charge, and there's some things he is not going to give up his power on. One of those is how BPA, spends its money to a certain extent and the costs that they incur. And so he was pretty adamant about not giving up any of that power, that he is going to be responsible for the cost that BPA goes through. There'll be more information at workshops this fall on the residential exchange program. So that's kind of working on a separate track. The contract and the residential exchange kind of intermix, but they're going to be on separate tracks moving forward. And that one's going to start a little later in the year. Also, Port Townsend Paper is the only existing direct service industry, which is a large single load, remaining for BPA. And they will be offered another contract if they ask for it. So at this point. So it's kind of on them to determine if they want to continue to get their power from BPA, which they wheel through us. So that would affect us in a little bit of a small way. I attended the Washington Public Agency Group meeting on July 28th. The meeting was a debrief or a summary of the key BPA 2028 contract points I just talked, more than what I just talked about, but the entirety of what BPA put forward. And WAPAG was encouraging feedback from its members on positive or negative on the Bonneville contract points. So again, I would expect Kevin, if we have anything that's of interest to us in particular, that Kevin would bring that to the board and say, hey, here's something we should talk about. At this point, there's nothing I want to bring forward to talk about as far as the contract goes. WAPAG will send that response to BPA with the feedback they receive. I don't think they gave a date. I know there's a WAPAG meeting here next week or week after, so I would imagine before then it'd be a good time to get that information in. One of the big things at the WAPAG meeting was the customers were concerned is basically cost control language, which goes back to, what Director Hairston, he's going to kind of still be calling the shots, but we, as the industry, want some assurances that BPA is going to be responsible with the way they're spending money, the way they're doing things. And so we'll see how that one plays out. What else? Also about the 20-year off ramps. And then another big issue was for some of the utilities, larger ones in particular, they've spent a lot of money and infrastructure on conservation. I mean, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, not just millions or tens of millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're concerned because they've lowered their load, how they're going to get credited when they redo these high water marks and the amount of load that everybody gets. They're concerned that they'll get shortchanged in that. So that's a big one, point of contention. And even for some smaller utilities, because it is somewhat relative as to how big you are, as to how much you spent in the form of conservation. So that's another really big issue. So that was it for those two meetings. I'll be in Portland for PPC on August 3rd and 4th. I meet with Kevin Street on August 5th. I'll attend our special meeting on August 9th. I will attend NOAANED on August 10th, probably remotely. I don't think I'll go to Spokane for that one unless there's something comes up. There's a reason for me to have to do that. I'll attend the BPA workshop on August 11th, and I will be in the booth at the county fair when Will gets around to scheduling us for that. So before our next meeting, that's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Randall.
On the 20th, the Economic Development Council Bylaws Subcommittee met. We've been meeting like every week or 2 weeks, and we're making good progress on updating the EDC bylaws, the role of the board and the board officers, conflict of interest rules, and confidentiality rules. So I'm a part of a small group, and then we take those policies to the full board. So I expect it will probably take the rest of the year to hopefully get through most of that stuff. So anyway, that's what we're working on. On the 21st, Energy Northwest had a special board meeting. They finalized their letter to BPA. On the 23rd, had a phone meeting with Will O'Donnell about PUD communications, just kind of our PR on some issues. On the 25th, had a phone meeting with Aaron Berg, and we had another meeting of the EDC bylaws group. On the 26th, the EDC board nominating subcommittee met, which I'm also on, and then traveled to Pasco for the Energy Northwest meetings on the 27th and 28th, and I'll give a quick report on those. So got a tour of Site 1, which is, they've got all their different properties kind of mostly together, but Site 1 is where they have 2 nuclear power plants that were only partially constructed during the WIPS process. One got to about 75%, one's about 30%. But they also have some vacant land left, and they're hoping to attract a proposal to build an advanced nuclear reactor there. And they were working with Grant County and one of the companies, and but Grant County has decided to put it in their own county. I guess so it's X Energy. But they did show us where they have a water withdrawal point from the Columbia River. They've got buildings built, even some pumps are installed. So they had a bunch of infrastructure that was built that could be reused. And they've also assessed much of their site for development. They've gone through the process of, are there artifacts here? Is there any of that stuff? So they still hope to have something developed there at some point in the future. On the 27th of July, the Simsway Coordinating Group met, and we did discuss the potential for needing to trim trees along Simsway, along the Boathaven property for reliability. And I think Kevin's going to talk more about that later in the meeting. Let's see here. Back to the Energy North, and I had to jump out of the Energy Northwest meeting to be a part of that meeting. Continuing with the Energy Northwest report, they signed a memorandum of understanding with a company called Curio, which proposes a chemical process to repurpose nuclear fuel waste and basically turn it into new nuclear fuel. They haven't been licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission yet, but Energy Northwest is basically sitting on all the spent fuel that they've ever made. And Bob Schutz, the executive director, believes that it has value. And one of the reasons that it's interesting to talk about the uranium and all the other materials that are in there that having future value. Energy Northwest had a visit by the Office of Clean Energy Development within the Department of Energy. And this is, I think it's a new department charged by the Biden administration with supporting any kind of new technology that would help us get to a clean energy economy and to reduce the risks that specific utilities face in exploring the new technology. So they felt good about that. The letter went to BPA about the what's that called? The EPU, the power upgrade for the nuclear power plant. And BPA has turned around and said that they are accepting the proposal to expand the capacity of the Columbia Generating Station and will include it in their future power rates, which I think is part of the 2028 contract period. So that was good news. Let's see. They also have Energy Northwest, different section of them does have a grant from the Department of Commerce regarding exploring voltage reduction as a form of energy savings at the utility level. They've got a $300,000 grant and they're looking for partners. Some utility that would be willing to kind of explore the options of, I'm guessing, modifying voltage levels to save energy or make the transmission more efficient. So if we're interested in that, they would like to talk. And let's see. They also found out here locally, we got one grant for type 3 or level 3 chargers, the one in the city by the Chamber of Commerce. The Energy Northwest grant that was for the loop around the whole peninsula was not successful. They did find out one reason why. And apparently they were penalized for not having specifically said, these are the sites, and having leases executed for those sites. So next time around, they plan to do that. And they said, well, the reason we didn't do that was because we don't get reimbursed for any work that is done before the grant's done. But apparently Commerce wants them to, or Transportation wants them to do work that won't get reimbursed. So anyway, that's
When's the next round?
I don't know. It seems like it's been regular though, like every year. I don't know if Will
There's
knows.
another one later this year. This
Yeah.
one was just awarded, was delayed a year. So it should be later this year.
Yeah. So anyway, I think they're feeling pretty good about that hopefully being the last step of getting that grant. Let's see here. And then we had a very interesting presentation by a gentleman named Paul Dockery, who works for the Clatskanie PUD, which is the PUD between Portland and Astoria. It's along the Columbia River. He's their energy resources manager. And he talked about that he viewed the challenges we face as utilities are, one, taking advantage of electrification, taking advantage of markets, and making sure we grow our workforces. And he talked about the benefits of electrification for our customers, especially with electric vehicles, that we can help our customers save money. And he went into detail on a specific program they're doing where they're putting in type 1 chargers, which is basically an outlet, and type 2 chargers, which we know what they are, without any fancy internet connection. And they're billing their customers $23 a month for the type 1 chargers and 60 some bucks a month for the type 2 chargers. And they're just putting a lock box on it. They're just doing something simple. He said, I can't find anything cheaper than a lock. So they bill them monthly on their customer accounts. They put them in, like the PUD office has some out there. And if one of the PUD workers wants access to that plug, they pay that monthly amount. And he felt like the type 1 plugins are really more efficient because they don't draw a lot of power. And he said you could have 7 cars charging at type 1s compared to 1 charging at a type 2. And it's going to get you over 8 hours, like 30 miles. And that's probably enough to get them home. So he was really interesting. And he also said that they're looking really seriously at how do they get employees for their utilities, that all utilities are short of employees, and they start at 4th grade. They have different programs where they go into the 4th grade classes, 5th grade, all the way through junior high and high school. And I think they take the Power Town thing into the little kids, but he said that they're really serious about this and they're seeing the results of it. So he was super fun. And he has a podcast, and it's called Public Power Underground. And it's been going on for quite a while. And I listened to some of it coming back from Pasco. So if you haven't checked it out, he covers a lot of different issues, and it's super, super cool. There's going to be an Energy Northwest strategic planning meeting at Port Ludlow, August 24th through the 26th, but we can't go there in person. Only the executive committee can go, but we can listen into it if you want to. On the 31st, I had a conversation with David Goldman of the Poplar Alliance about the Simsway project. And on August 8th, phone meetings with Joel Paisner and Eric Taves of the Port about the same thing, Simsway. On looking ahead, on the 4th, we'll have another Simsway coordinating meeting. And then on the 6th, on Saturday, there's going to be an open house on the Simsway project with the city and the Port and us, basically showing the progress that the stakeholder group has been making. That's going to occur at the Port Townsend Community Center from 10 o'clock to 1, and anybody's welcome to come in and learn more about that. And then on the 5th, I'm hoping to participate in the Chamber Cafe PUD broadband presentation that Will's going to give. Our EDC bylaws group meets again on the 8th. I'll be there for the special board meeting on the 9th. And then I'll be there at the county fair also with my assigned slot. So I will stop with that.
Thank you. And I have a relatively speaking, extremely brief report. On the 20th of July, I had a meeting with Don McDaniel, met with Kevin on the 27th. 28th, I participated in the meeting with our water sewer department and residents of Beckett Point, still trying to drill down to the details of cost and what are the options that might be available for the customers there to reduce their costs. That's related to what we commissioners approved, which is approximately a 400% increase in their sewer costs. And while we subsidize them, and they understand we subsidize them for a significant period of time, a 400% increase definitely caught their attention. So on the 1st of August, I had a conversation with legal counsel Joel Paisner, also talked with a customer who lives on Sentinel Firs Road. And I had contacted Will O'Donnell regarding when that might be lined up in order to benefit from our broadband projects. And it looks like 2024, assuming we get the grant that we haven't yet applied for because it's too soon to apply. I had a meeting earlier today with General Manager Kevin Street. Looking forward to our meeting on the 9th to discuss the Citizen Advisory Board. I'll have another meeting with Kevin on the 10th. On the 12th, I anticipate going to the Jefferson Broadband Action Team Executive Committee meeting. And on the 16th, again, I have Kevin on my calendar, and that is my report. So we can now move forward.
Commissioner,
Yes.
a little more on the Beckett. Do you have a timeline when you expect that process to be concluded? I mean, we've not instituted a rate increase there, right, as scheduled, correct?
I thought we did. I
No,
thought
we
did
did.
the
Did we?
first, the
Oh,
first
okay.
year.
Did
Yeah.
we? Okay, I wasn't sure where we're at in the process. I
Yeah.
thought we gave them a pass for a while or
I
something.
think the
No,
whole
we've-
thing is about those future years, right?
Okay.
Past the first year.
Yes, and it's staggered increases so that it's not hitting them all at once. But at the last year, they will have seen their rates increase very substantially.
Thank you.
But, you know, based on the cost of service study, and that's what we have to work with. So old business, item 10.1, the retail and wholesale broadband policies. And that would be Kevin and or Will.
No, I'm gonna start here and it'll be myself and Mike Bailey.
Oh, okay.
Mike,
Do I have a different agenda? I had 10.1 is our US loan, construction loan.
That's correct.
that's correct.
Oh, okay.
We sent out an update on Friday about that. Maybe it was Monday. My apologies.
So do I have the latest agenda?
It looks like you have an outdated agenda. There's one more item, the RUSDA construction loan right there.
Okay.
And
I see.
that was late to the agenda. We did not receive this until Monday morning from RUS. And so as you know, many months ago, Mike Bailey started to work on a loan documents for RUS to support the new building and to accommodate the meter exchange program, roughly $5.3 million. On Monday morning, we were notified that the loan has been approved. So right now we have 14 days to have the president of the board sign the document that says, okay, we're moving forward. There are a couple more steps. Once we send this to RUS, then there's a loan document. We get all the information. They put the loan documents together. And at that time, we will have a loan. We'll come back to the board and say, okay, we're signing the documents. This approval letter is just one more step in the process. Very quick turnaround though. We have 14 days. That's why it was a late add to the agenda. And it was kind of out of the blue that we weren't expecting it. I'm going to take a minute here. Mike has worked really hard on the loan documentation. Will has helped on some of the stuff that we've had to put in for RUS. And this will help replenish our reserves. We've already paid for the building, but we can use this loan for the building. And we've spent quite a bit out of reserves for the metering project that's moving forward. And all of those funds we've already expensed, we will get reimbursed for if we continue down this path. So, Mike, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, so it was out of the blue that we got approved. This is just mixed up. I did try to reach out to Rodney Peach today, our RUS rep. Until we actually do the loan documents, though, we don't have the interest rate won't lock in until we fund the loan, until we draw down those funds. But this was good news, to come into yesterday, to get approved. It is kind of a weight off our back. So yeah, we're just looking for a motion authorizing Ken to sign the letter and finish up so we can move into that next step. But yeah, it's good news that we were approved for it. So, and it will help replenish our reserves that we've already spent out on things.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
Mike, did I read the documents right? Is this a loan for 3 years? Is that what it says in there, or what?
No.
Remind us what
Usually you have it's a 3-year, the work, what you're seeing there is the work plan period that we would have 3 years to complete, like the meter projects to draw down the funds. The 3-year draw period, and then it ended up being like a 20, it was either between 24 and 26. I don't remember the exact payback time frame.
And then I realize the interest rates we can't lock them in. We won't know what it is until we approve this thing and they take whatever steps. But what's the range of interest rates kind of we're looking at?
I don't know right offhand. I was hoping to have that because I knew that question was going to come up tonight. But I didn't get it from Rodney. Last time we were looking, it was still under 3%. I mean, it had gone up a little bit just, with the Federal Reserve Bank changing theirs and stuff. But it still should be, it's still going to be pretty low.
the loan we got for buying the utility, I think was 2.75 or something like that. So it's.
Yeah.
And I guess the last thing that this brings up, Kevin, is do you have concerns at this point that you will not be able to expend the money on the meter project in 3 years, given kind of uncertainties with supplies and difficulty that we may have in implementing this thing? Do you see that as an issue?
We have to finish the meter program as soon as possible. So the 3 years is a hard stop.
Okay.
There are ways to extend it a little bit.
If we need to modify the loan, we can do that. Okay.
Cammy, you have your hand up?
Kent and Dan has his hand.
Yes, you're cutting out, commissioners, and I can't decipher what you're saying, and I'm assuming our audience can't either. So I don't know what's causing that.
Dan?
Well, I'll stay close to the mic and let me know if I'm not.
That's better. Yes.
So again, I've gone along with, taking the steps with this borrowing, looking to borrow the money. I have some reservations about 5.3 million. When we did the 4-year work plan, there was several $1,000,000 for the meters in the 4-year work plan. And that's going out to 2024, 2023. So again, some of that money should have already been expended in engineering and whatever else and parts and pieces. I realize inflation, supply chain are cutting into that, but I have reservations about the whole 5.3. At this point, I'd be willing to do the 1.3 for the building. I don't know if we can split this up or not. So I guess that's where my question is headed is, do we have to take, is it all or nothing, or can we take a partial part of it? Because I would see refreshing our reserves with the 1.3 or 1.4 or whatever that works out to be, but I'm not necessarily in favor of borrowing the full 5.3 with money already somewhat earmarked for the meters over the past couple of years and another year still beyond this one.
Maybe Kevin, you can respond to that. Is it possible to modify these documents, or is this a take it or leave it kind of option?
So on the building, you have to take the full amount, 1.3, because they're funding the building. We could go back to RUS on the meter project and say, okay, we're going to fund part of it in-house now and take part of those reserves. My caution here is, especially on the meters, it kind of makes sense to spread this out over new customers coming in over time. And that's how utilities usually fund projects like this. So that and it's not only new construction, it's a new customer coming into an existing house. Those things do, over time, if you borrow the money, it's spread out to new customers, not just our existing customers. We pay out a reserve for existing customers, but we can look at options. I think, though, specifically for the metering project, it makes sense to borrow the full amount.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because it's a long-term loan at a very favorable interest rate, and our reserves are lower than they've been for a long time. So I would not be in favor of either the alternative of postponing the meter replacement project, which has been on the back burner for years and needs to be addressed, or taking the money out of reserves now, which will further lower what we have in the event of some sort of emergent situation. Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, I get the concern, and we have the $5 million for emergencies. I think this is a belt tightening era that we're in. So I realize it's bad timing to expand the business or want to catch up on maintenance and that sort of thing for a myriad of reasons. But I think we do have to keep in mind the ratepayers as we start to borrow more money. That's interest rate, and on the meters in particular, life expectancy 15 years, give or take. If you're borrowing longer than that, you're going to get into this loop of still paying off old meters when maybe the technology changes or, you have to borrow more money again. So that concerns me, is the length of term. And the other is the meters were promised to return on an investment by more accurate reading of generating more revenue. So I think we need to, if we're going to take it at its word that it's going to generate more revenue, that's less money we should have to borrow. So that's just a couple points to equate into, work into that equation.
I had a question. I asked this before and I apologize. I can't remember the answer. And the question was about early repayment on the loan. As Dan's pointing out, if there's a 15-year lifespan on the meters, and it actually says that in the loan documents, expected life 15 years. Is there ability for us to repay this early, or is it in nobody's interest and we can't do it?
So in the old days, you could not repay the loan early. It was scheduled to go out that long. I believe Mike may have different information now, but I don't know.
Okay. Mike, do you know?
I think you can a little bit. It just makes it harder. You can't refinance them, no.
Okay.
I think you can pay it off early. It just takes a little bit, some hoops to jump through. You just can't refinance it
And
to
that
get a
would,
lower rate.
would that presumably save us some interest if we paid it off early?
Presumably you could, yes.
Well, just weighing in on this, I share Commissioner Collins's concern about our cash reserves. I mean, we're under 7 million now based on the consent agenda financial report. And 9-10 million is what we need to have our, is it 30 days of operation, 60 days of operation, 90 days. Thank you. 90 days of operation. So $3 million for 30 days. So I look at it too, Dan's point, if we do bring in more revenue, that'll ease pressure on future rate increases as our costs go up. So, and one thing I didn't say from the Energy Northwest discussion was they're really pushing everybody to get the advanced meters, because you need to have that in order to do any of these things we're talking about dealing with loads and so forth, active management of loads and time of use rates and everything else that we very well may need to do in the near, not too distant future. So I think this is a situation where I'm comfortable spreading the cost out over 20 years to our customers of investing in this new building and the meters, as opposed to pulling it out of cash now. That's where I'm at.
Commissioner?
So the Mike or Kevin, and I realize this is a bit of a crystal ball question, because today it was cooler and it rained and people weren't running air conditioning. So, our revenue rate, being ahead for the year behind, what are we expecting? Again, crystal ball time, not expecting hard numbers, but what do we see as return on being able to increase our reserve between now and the end of the year? I realize there's a lot can happen, but what trajectory are we on right now? Are we still burning through reserves? Or are we starting to get to where we're going to be building reserves again?
So I'll go first, Mike, and then you can go.
Okay.
So reserves are not only a product of the weather, it's also a product of when bills come in. So we get BPA and we get the RUS loan documents, which come at different times, pull down reserves, and then we build up a little bit. And then we pay a large bill. So my take, and Mike's probably a little different, my take is until December, we'll go down a pinch. We don't really start building revenue until January timeframe. We will build a little bit in December, but at year end, we try to pay off a lot of things that have to be paid off at the end of the year versus wait until it gets into January. So we have some larger costs there. So my crystal ball is reserves will go down a little bit from where they are today, but I could be surprised.
So maybe Mike can give us a refresh on where we are for what our revenue for the year is, how far ahead on revenue we are, or behind. I believe we're ahead.
We are ahead. Trying to look at the financials real fast here.
Sorry, Mike.
So-
Spot.
No, you're fine. So electric, we're just under $1 million ahead. And for water, we are about 380,000 ahead. But like Kevin said, I think our cash reserves are going to go down. You know, June, it was a $1.5 million difference between May and June, which basically is our RUS payment. Basically, we'll build up for the next 2 to 3 months, and then we get BPA and RUS in the same month. That kind of hurts our reserves because they're both over $1 million. So we'll have 2 more RUS payments before the end of the year.
But
Plus,
this is,
we'll have,
these are all known. These are budgeted costs that we expect along the way.
yeah, but they do affect the reserves and do, you know, we are getting, but reserves, you know, that's the revenues. When the cash comes in, it's different than when the revenues actually hit. You know, we accrue the revenues as they're billed. And then as payments come in, that affects our reserves. So it's matching up the expenses with the cash coming in.
So I'm looking at the letter from USDA dated July 29th, 2022, which calls for my signature. Do I need, it seems like it's appropriate that there be a motion from the board authorizing me to sign.
Yes, that's what we need according to Rodney, is we just need you authorized to sign it. We sign this back so we can move into the next step.
You want to take any public comment before we go to motion?
There isn't a motion before you. I don't think you,
I'm looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to authorize the president of the board to sign the loan acceptance document.
So for clarification, this is to take the loan,
Yes,
the full amount.
yes.
The full amount, yeah, as proposed.
And I'll
well,
second.
just, yeah, go ahead, and then I can explain.
So I seconded, the motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Paisner, please go ahead.
Just for clarity, I mean, the letter before you is an offer by RUS to enter into a loan agreement with them on the terms that they provided. And by signing this, you accept that offer. And the next step, you'll have actual loan documents, loan agreement, mortgage, I think, Mike, isn't that right? And the like, it'll be an actual agreement. But it is for the amount requested.
Thank you.
That was the intent of my motion.
So the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further comment or discussion by the commissioners? Is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing,
Oh, we got a hand from
there's
somebody.
public comment. Mr. Durgan?
I'd like to recommend that you forego getting into more debt. I don't think it's appropriate at this time. Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment? If not, we can proceed with the vote. All in favor of the motion, which would authorize me to sign the acceptance letter for a loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the amount of $5,430,000.
I will say aye.
I will say aye.
No.
Motion passes. So the next item on our agenda is the retail and wholesale broadband policies.
So we have the documents we brought forward last time. The only changes that we've made are to the acceptable use policy, and that is for the appeals process. And I can bring that up in a moment and walk you through what we've added. Just hold on a second while I mess with some of the settings. Go ahead. Great.
So I'll add some color here while Will is finding the documents. A couple things I just want to stress with people is some of the monitoring and some of the stuff we're looking at. At present, we get notification, for example, from NOAANET when someone pirates a movie. Those are copyright laws. So that stuff is being monitored. NOAANET gets notification from somebody else, and then if it's done on our network, we get notification. So these are important things that do have to be monitored. And we do have to monitor the network, denial of service. If bad things are happening internal to our network, we have to be able to see that it's happening and be able to monitor and fix the situation. So those are the monitoring side of things and why it is important for an ISP to do our due diligence in monitoring. We're monitoring for specific things. We're not watching the websites you go to unless we're requested by the government. Then the government, law enforcement can come in and ask us. So we have to have the capability. And that's what we're talking about here in these documents, because in the future, we will probably be asked to do some things by the law enforcement to help out. And we will have those capabilities. So.
Okay. So
Are there any other vendors besides NOAANET that need those kind of need that kind of access?
Everyone.
Yeah, I would just add that, we have agreements with vendors who provide us both equipment and services and software. And in all of those contracts, they mandate us to have the ability to monitor the network, to make sure that no one's, stealing their software, hacking, things like that. And that's, these are boilerplate agreements with pretty substantial corporations out there that we do not generally have an opportunity to negotiate against. So that's the other aspect of monitoring.
So what we've added to this version of the acceptable use policy is a process for a customer to dispute a claim violation of that acceptable use policy. We originally, we're covered in our separate customer service policies, which these policies refer to, has a process for disputing a billing charge, but it doesn't have a process for disputing a claim violation of the policy. So we added a new section that specifically addresses that to the acceptable use policy. It follows the same format wherein the customer can request basically a sit down with the broadband director and the department or the broadband director. We do that in person. If they're still unhappy, they can have an appeal hearing. We run that the same way we've done for a water or electric customer. We choose a couple of folks, they hear the case, and they make the decision. And then the customer can either accept that decision or pursue other avenues. Those are the only changes that we're proposing from the last version that we all went through together. We're hoping that are acceptable. We would like to move forward. If we need to move them to the next packet in the consent agenda, we can do that as well. It's really up to you commissioners on which sections you'd like to discuss or how you want to move forward.
Is there a discussion?
Well, I'll go first. And, Tom Tiersch has been one of the people who's been the most active in providing comments. And I did read through Tom's comments, and I see this tension. Tom is focused on the message we're sending to the customer and I'm sure Tom will probably chime in and speak for himself, but my sense of it is that the message we're sending to the customer, how readable the documents are I think a lot of his concern. And then there's this other concern about our ability to monitor and what we're asking the customer to agree to. So I think those are kind of the two big issues. And some of the language that Tom proposes, I actually like, quite a bit. It's kind of like a positive statement a lot of times instead of negatives. And and I've talked to Joel Paisner about this too. And I think Joel doesn't want to, modify this anymore. Feels like we've looked at it enough, I think, and that we need to have the language in there that we have to protect the PUD's interests. But some of it, I look at like the prohibited actions. It's this whole laundry list. And Tom's point is, some of the things that you say, or you may not be saying something. So one of the things he said is like, including but not limited to, is one of the ideas I came up with. And I don't know do we have to get into all that detail of all these possible bad things that someone could do, or could we have more of a summary list so it's not such, it is hard to read. And so the lawyer in me is trying to understand the purpose of it and the effective notification of the customer. And then another part of me is worried about, well, what about this law enforcement stuff, or what about these other third parties that we may be worried about? I'm trying to understand what is the real purpose of this language and functionality of it for our PUD. So, and then also I'm kind of looking to you two. And if you are moved by Tom's comments to want to look at any of those sections, or if you feel like we've looked at this enough. So those are kind of my questions and thoughts.
So I find myself also of two minds on this. Having read through Tom's suggestions, which has a lot of appeal because it would simplify the document considerably. And yet, in talking with the legal counsel, this is standard language. And the one point that I have made in conversations with Joel and with Kevin, I would like to see a couple of examples and clarification so that people understand if you're going to download videos, make illegal copies, and it comes to our attention, we're going to need to act on that. And people, I would dare go so far as to say people within Jefferson County do that on occasion. This is not an uncommon practice. And I believe we've already been notified that that has taken place. So I think the intent, and you make a good point, Commissioner Randall, I think the intent of this needs to be a little bit clearer that it's not our job, it's not our intention to be spying on our customers. We're not going to randomly look at what people are, the websites that people are bringing up. We're not going to do that randomly. We're not going to do that systematically. We will only do that if we become aware that there is illegal activity probably taking place. So it's not our intent to violate anybody's rights. At the same time, in order to maintain the integrity of our system, technical monitoring absolutely has to take place. That somebody isn't doing data mining and conducting operations that could potentially bring down large segments of the whole system. So we absolutely have the right to look at data usage and any other activity that might compromise the integrity of the network. So I would like to see some minor modifications that would include that kind of language and I hate like hell to prolong the process since we've been over and over and over this. But I think we're almost there, but I don't think we're there yet with the documents that I'm personally comfortable with. Well,
Something that occurs to me in what you say makes good sense. I'm wondering if that is language that we can add outside of the document. So we have the policy that protects us. And then when we put the policy on the page, we have an explainer about how the document's used and how we do go about our business. That's separate than the actual document. Because these policies, in my understanding, and Joel could speak to this, are to protect the PUD. But then to explain to the customer some of the rationale and some of our practices, I think we could add that to the website, to other materials, to educate customers. Would that be a fair compromise?
no, I've said previously that we need to have a one-page, simple cover document that people most likely will read, and that explains, here's what we're responsible for, here's what you're responsible for.
So I was gonna, Will, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I think both the concerns raised by Commissioner Randall and Commissioner Collins, I think have to do with readability and understandability of these policies. But, our point is, as Jeff said, I mean, these are, these are standard policies. Okay, we went through numerous different jurisdictions to look at these different providers. So there's nothing in here that is outside of the norm for an ISP. And your concerns being raised, and I would venture to say some of those raised by Tom Tiersch have to do with, are our customers going to understand what these are? And having a one-pager outside the scope of the policies and agreements that we want our customers to be bound by makes a lot of sense. And, I think there's the tension is always there in a legal agreement about trying to cover all the circumstances that are going to arise and making sure it's as succinct and clear as possible. And, we've tried to strike that balance, but, we can adjust some of the language, go back through and look at it yet one more time, but I'm just wondering if it's more accurate to focus on sort of a statement to the customer, letter to the customer, or something like that outside the policy. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, Dan?
Thanks. Yeah, so I thought Ken did a pretty good job of laying it out there. I really do appreciate Tom Tiersch and anybody else that weighed in. I think there was a couple other people I have talked to as well. I know they're coming from a good place. It's all constructive. It's trying to do the best for our customers, which ultimately, this board, people can come in and sit in this room and look us now eye to eye and have these discussions if we get something wrong. I get the boilerplate mentality. We're entering into a new business line, working with, in the private sector as a public entity. That's a tough needle to thread. I'm still not sure how we're going to make that all work out, but hopefully Mr. Paisner will get us through all that. But I think it does make sense to give some examples of what is misconduct, right? Just as a baseline, because a lot of people really are ignorant of the law or uninformed or misinformed about what you can do and what you can't do. So I think we do have to be a little descriptive, and whether that's as an add-on, one pager or whatever, I'll leave that to the legal counsel and staff to work through those issues. So I'm fine with taking one more step here if that's what we need to do. But ultimately, the public the public has to have faith in us, just like we have in them, that we're going to do the right thing by them. And that's, as long as we're accessible, that's more than you're going to get from some of these public entities. We're building an open access network where if you don't like our policy, you can go to somebody else if you think their policy is better. So you have that option as we go along. You don't have to come deal with us if you don't like our customer use policy, so it's going to be a work in progress. It's going to be a living document, in my opinion. We're going to have to tweak stuff as we go along, and there's no getting around it. So we can beat it up, knock it down, all we want here in the interim, but until we actually get some customers signed up and start seeing how it plays out, it's all a big question mark.
Can I say one more thing? I had a long conversation with Joel, and one of the questions I asked him was, are there standards out there, like a regulatory agency that oversees kind of what we're doing, that sets standards for these agreements or what we're supposed to be policing? And his response was really interesting. He said, the internet is this big unregulated area. And I think it's really wild to think of that. Like electrical, we have all these safety standards and rules, and there's, rules all over the place generated by folks, but the internet is this different thing. And we kind of, I was telling Joel, it kind of feels like we're the lifeguard at the pool. We're there to make sure that the activities that are occurring in this unregulated area, people aren't getting hurt, or something happens that we can put a stop to it and keep it safe. So the language in here, the role that we're going to be playing, as Dan points out, we're a public agency that's getting into what historically has kind of been a private area. It does feel a little weird. And I think, as you say, we will modify terms and documents and agreements as necessary to make them right. And we are very accessible and accountable because we meet so regularly, and we're right here. Anybody can literally stop us on the street and say, hey, I had to sign this document. I didn't like this section. What's the deal? Or I got contacted by the broadband department about this thing I was doing that's completely fine. It's a legitimate business and you guys have a problem with it. So anyway, long story short, I'm okay with proceeding how we want to proceed. I feel fairly comfortable that we can modify this over time. We could direct staff to summarize things and make them, much shorter and briefer and to the point about the responsibilities of each party. So I'm good with however we want to proceed.
So next steps.
I don't know if we haven't taken public comment again either. I don't know if there's anybody out there that wants to weigh in.
I'm not seeing any hands.
So I would propose next steps is
There is a hand now.
we take this document back. We've heard some things that we need to do, and we come up with a cover sheet. Maybe do another quick review, and then we'll just bring it back next week.
I didn't see the hand before. I see one now. Pierce, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, was that me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, okay, thanks. I didn't raise my hand until you asked for comments, so that's what I did. Couple of things here. First of all, in my most recent email to you folks about this thing, I asked you a simple question. In the version of the acceptable use policy that I proposed, can you show me one example where what I'm proposing increases the risk to the PUD? Because that's been, the standard line up to this point. Well, we're just doing this to protect the PUD. Well, I haven't heard anybody give me an example. I got no response to that question. And I still haven't, in any of this discussion, seen anything that justifies it. Commissioner Randall, you said that customers are asked to sign this agreement. No, they're not asked. They're forced. If they want your service, they are forced to sign this agreement, and they are forced to agree to all of these terms and conditions. So let's be clear about what it says and what's really happening here. The idea of a cover sheet or an one pager to explain, that is unfortunately contradicted by the Internet Service Agreement itself, which says that this is the only writing that matters. Any other writing has no force. And so you're going to have to address that and modify it. Because if you make promises in some cover sheet that really aren't part of the agreement, then those promises are meaningless legally. My concern here is not about the readability. It's about the content, the quality, and what it's actually doing to the customers. In the the latest email that I sent to you, I pointed out, this long list of things that you say that people can't do. And then I highlighted one of them, which is something that says, is perfectly legal to do. It says you can't collect or attempt to collect personal information about others without their prior consent. And I gave you 3 examples of perfectly legal uses that people do over the internet all the time, and yet would be prohibited by the wording in this policy. The wording is perfectly clear. What's not clear is why it's in there. It's really an absurd condition. And I think I can find, I know I can find other examples of the things that are listed that are simply not supportable in a reasonable way. There are lots of things that people do over the internet. There are way more things that people do that are illegal and yet which aren't listed. And as I said, if you just list these, and as Commissioner Randall pointed out, what's missing in here is the "but not limited to" clause. If you just list these things, well, I guess if it's not one of these things, then it must be okay. People are going to assume. There's just so many things wrong with listing it. If you just go through and say, look, don't violate the law. And I gave you a reference that shows a laundry list of all the laws that apply to what you can and can't do, what you can't do over the internet. Digital Millennium Copyright Act, yes, and all sorts of other things. You can't commit a crime using the internet. And, if it comes down to having to monitor the content of what's going on, you do that with law enforcement approval, with a court order. That's what Kevin was talking about. It was brought to your attention that somebody was pirating a movie. Okay, how did that happen? Well, the site that was hosting that movie or the owner of that movie uncovered it, filed a complaint under DMCA, that went to NOAANET, NOAANET came to you, and you participated in that investigation and did the right thing, but only in a lawful and legal manner. Just the statement in the policy that says that PUD is allowed to monitor the content of what a person does without any restriction, without any conditions, just do it. That's the part that I most strongly object to. Yeah, you're a monopoly provider on this thing. For those people that can't get broadband in any other way, the PUD is the monopoly provider. And as such, you are forcing people who need broadband, because it is now a utility service, it's an essential public service. You're forcing them to agree to terms and conditions which are just odious. I find them very offensive, as you can tell from all the effort that I put into trying to convince you to go a different direction. And, you seem to be unwilling to do that, seem to be unwilling to budge from your stance that you have the right to monitor whatever is going on at any time. And, like I said, that's probably my final attempt, because you don't seem to be willing to budge. Yes, you've incorporated some of my suggestions into the agreement. It's been improved, but the fundamental problem that I have is that you have simply not given up forcing people to sign away their First Amendment and their Fourth Amendment rights. And that's just unacceptable. Sorry I have to take such a hard line on it, but that's the way I feel. I'll shut up. Thanks.
Well, thank you for your input and for all of the input and the time and effort you've made to bring this to our attention. And the point I was making earlier, which I'm now somewhat persuaded that it should be in the language of the agreement and not just in a cover letter, that people get the reassurance that we're not going to randomly monitor their internet usage, but we will respond if there is a complaint. If it's brought to our attention that a law is being broken, then we'll do what we need to do. But I think Mr. Tirsch makes a compelling point that people should not feel like, well, because they're signing up with a PUD, we're going to be looking over their shoulder at the websites that they visit or their correspondence. And I don't think that's what we're in the business to do. Mr. Durgan?
Yeah, Mr. Tiersch is making some really good points about trying to inhibit people's First Amendment rights. And I think that you need to really take this back and look at it some more. Thank you.
So, all right. Any further discussion about the policies?
I got a question for Joel. Joel, do you have any response to Tom Tiersch's comment about how does this document protect the PUD and our customers' interests more than his edited version?
The changes proposed by Tom are incredibly vague in general. And I think in no way do they let customers know exactly what the PUD is concerned about that's going on its network. It just says follow the law, be legal, just do everything under the law. But if you clicked on the link that he provided, there's so many laws listed there. So, I will take to heart one comment that we should include, including but not limited to the following. But I think the idea here is that we want to let people know what it is we're doing, what we're concerned about going on the network. There's nothing wrong with that. I disagree with the analysis that it's a violation of your First Amendment rights if you use this. Most people have access to other providers, whether it's Starlink or us. I mean, you have access to other providers if you don't like it. I mean, it is a competitive business. So I think this agreement, the way it's written, does protect the PUD. I think as written by Mr. Tiersch, it's vague. You have to refer to other things, do your own legal research to determine what laws actually apply to you. We've at least made an attempt to try and provide people with examples of what we're concerned about on our network. And as I've said before, the way this will be administered is, you can either trust that the PUD is going to do this or not, but we have no interest in monitoring what people are doing. As I understand it, we're not going to be providing an email service. People will get email elsewhere. We're not looking at what people are doing there. We're interested in what happens on the network. So I don't agree with his analysis in terms of what this document does to protect the PUD. And I think his agreement is just woefully inadequate for those purposes. It may certainly meet his concerns about making sure that it's clear to everyone that the PUD has no interest in monitoring, but I think we can state that as a matter of policy and make sure that our employees don't do that. But, as written, it really ties the hands of Kevin and Will and the team in terms of protecting the internet, and it impacts how users will use the services. So I know some people are very concerned about what Tom has raised, but others want to make sure that the internet works properly and they're protected. So, it's a balancing act. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just a different approach. He's got a different point of view. I respect that point of view, but I disagree with it in terms of providing you the advice that I think is necessary to operate this network successfully.
Okay, So Joel, I wanted to follow up. So sounds like you have no problem and think it's a good idea to include the language before all the list of horribles, including but not limited to, something along those lines. And then Commissioner Collins brought up this statement that, and you can interpret it and restate it as you wish or think appropriate, but this kind of idea that we're not monitoring and policing things ourselves. We're really going to respond to issues brought to our attention by others. And is that something that can be implemented in here, or is that not really how it's going to work? Or could you?
Well, it may, the standard example is that, we'll get a warrant or an inquiry from the FBI or the Secret Service or, whoever's investigating it. And they'll say, you have this IP number, we've traced it to your network, and we want to see everything related to that. And they provide you with some sort of search warrant. I mean, that's standard, right? So we're going to respond to that. But if we only do the thing, if we only are responding to complaints, right, then we're not actively checking the network. And I just think there's this fundamental misunderstanding about what it is the network that we're operating is going to do. I mean, I don't think that the PUD is going to be looking at what people are viewing on the internet. Now, Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just not what's happening out there. So I can put some language together that we all are comfortable with. I think it's fine to have an example. It's fine to have a statement of policy if that's what you guys want. And then if we're missing something, I mean, ultimately, this is just my advice. So if you want something more, then you're going to have to tell me exactly what you want, and we'll put it in, because it's your document and you need to feel comfortable with it. Yeah, and I'm not going to go through point by point, Mr. Tiers. I'm sorry. I won't. I've read through your agreement, and I'm just not going to do that.
You responded to my question, Joel. I appreciate it.
So we've got 25 minutes left to the meeting. And I appreciate all of the time and effort you put into this, Joel. It's been
So we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back next time.
It's been a difficult slog, to say the least. So, is there more on broadband that we need to talk about? Then let's move ahead to the Sims Way poplar trees.
Bring up some pictures here real quick for us to start to discuss. This is information for the board from myself and staff. So to start with, so far in 2022, 53% of all outages have been tree outages. Also, customer outage hours. So far this year in 2022, 81.9% of all customer outages have been caused by trees. So the PUD takes trees very seriously in how we maintain our network. A lot of this came about on Sims Way. Some of our newer concerns was we have been running this line de-energized, and because of that, it has the potential to cause for outages to last a little bit longer in the downtown Port Townsend area. As you can see by these pictures, the tree growth has came into the lines. And so approximately a month ago when we had the transmission outage and had to reroute power on this, we had 2 trees in this stretch of line that actually started to burn a little bit during energization period. So the PUD has been looking at ways to work within the rules and regulations that we have to come up with options. We know these trees need to be trimmed. We feel as long as we don't have a tree through the transmission line, and this is the hardest part of how to operate the system today, we can leave it de-energized. As long as we don't have an outage, we're okay. That's a dumb statement, but what we've been researching and continue to look at are ways to let the process that is being taken place by the stakeholders group and the responsibility we have with our customers and the public, how can we make everything work together and have an outcome that's agreeable to the largest number of people. So moving forward, again, this is an operational decision. We're going to monitor the trees. We're going to look at options that we have. We are working with some people these situations aren't unique to Jefferson County and our PUD. Others have come up with solutions. One of the problems we have with some of these other solutions is there's such a long run of trees. So to barricade during energization, to do some of those things does cause more difficulty. But we are working with others. We will have the August 6th meeting where the shareholders will present their presentation to the public. Most of their information has been on the website, so it's very easily found. On the 23rd, the information from the tree holder or from the shareholders group will go to the tree group from the city. At that time, the PUD will reevaluate again and look at the options we have moving forward. It may become, though, if circumstances happen and we have to re-energize this line, we will have to take action very fast and move forward. As of today, though, we are going to monitor the leave of the energized or the line de-energized and see what happens. We are coming into outage season, and that's a concern. One of the other concerns we have, when we first started this process, the underground material was approximately 20 weeks out. We have information that we just went back to the vendors and said, okay, how long is material out today? We knew it would be increased. The problem we have today is material is 50 to 52 weeks out. So it's more than double. So as the solutions work forward and we come up with plans, it is a longer lead project than we originally thought. But again, the city, the port, and the PUD should come to a final resolution within 2 months, hopefully, and we'll keep the board informed. Emergency situations, it does become operational prerogative to have to move quickly and do what's necessary. But other than that, the PUD is gonna direction that will give the shareholders a little time to put their case forward. As long as it keeps on pace and we don't have outages where we have to do an emergency response, we'll move.
So in an emergency, you're talking about a trimming of some sort in an emergency to be able to energize, or what kind of cost are we looking at for a minimal to make the lines operational for an emergency purpose. If we know the power is going to be out for 10, 12, 24 hours and you need to energize it to redirect, what's the cost for a minimal tree trim to get us through that stretch?
I'm not gonna give you a cost. I'm gonna say emergency work usually happens at night. So it costs us double what it does during a planned work. So if it took us $10,000 during the daytime, it will take us $20,000 at night. So those are the issues. If this line and the trees have to coexist for a year, we would have to do a little bit more trimming than say if they only had to last 3 months. In 3 months, we could do minimal trimming and get by. We can't now because of the delay in material supply chain issues that we're running into.
So Ken, if I can, to try and move us along, so I know we're short of time. So the message I'm hearing is on this Saturday from 10 to 1, there's going to be an open house at the community center that people can come in and check it out, see what's the information is and share their thoughts. The process is wrapping up. The Parks Board meets on the 23rd, and then we are trying to set up a joint meeting with the city and the port in September to hear the recommendations of the Parks Board and the stakeholders group. And what I'm hearing is our long-term goals are still to underground, but I know that we're only going to underground if we get the money from the PIF grant to do that. And that means the port has to expand in some fashion or form. And so if you're interested in this, get involved in the process, weigh in. And if we don't underground, we're going to be whacking these trees for the rest of time. And that's not going to be pretty. So I think it's in everybody's interest to find a solution that works and balances things out. And you're telling us that it's going to take, probably a year to get this stuff underground. Maybe we could do, I don't know if we could do the conduit sooner, if the conduit's available and the wire's not, if we could actually do the trenching and get the conduit in at, at a time that works for us and then pull the wire through later. But the trees are going to need to be trimmed before that. So people need to prepare themselves, but hopefully they can see the bigger answer, where is this headed? And that should hopefully give folks some comfort in what we're trying to do and the shared interests. So I'll stop there.
Collins, can we ask for members on the remote members to talk about the audio? I'm getting a number of signals from folks that they cannot hear us if there's crackling. Can someone fill me in what's going on? We can't hear it on our end.
It's really distorted.
Is it me that was distorted?
Everyone will, Kevin is, I think you can understand, I can understand you, maybe others can't, but it's just constant distortion.
Is it helpful when a person is literally right on the microphone?
It's helpful in that it's louder, but it's still distorted.
We got some quality control issues, and I'm sure we can listen to the recording afterwards and see how bad it was.
When, just so I can understand what's happening, when did it start?
I think it started when Kevin started talking about the Sims Way project.
Okay. He was a ways from the mic. I don't know.
But each of you are distorted. I mean, there's no everyone in that room who's talking on a mic is distorted, I think.
Yeah, Joel's coming in loud and clear. It's kind of an overload sound.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like it's this microphone system because that's what we're all using. And if we speak through our computers.
Now you're better.
I'm on the
It's
mic.
not the first time I've been told I was distorted.
But join the club, buddy.
Yeah. You sound better now. It sounds better now.
Well, I'm also talking through a mask and that doesn't help. Is there more discussion on the Sims Way trees? Is there any public comment at this point? We are running out of time. We've got about 10 minutes left and we have a couple of items remaining on the agenda under new business. So the training and travel policy and employee attire policy.
There's also EZC commissioner
Oh,
rotation.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Hopefully that can be quick too. I'm just proposing that I stay on there till the end of the year because I think we're just working through like policies and conflict of interest stuff and this, that, and the other thing. So
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Again, I'd like a little more defined timeline though, because,
December 31st.
well, no, I don't mean by the end of the year. I
Oh.
mean, as far as to when the EDC actually seated the board and that sort of thing, because maybe past the end of the year makes sense. I'm just curious as to what all the timelines are.
We basically effectively kind of got started in October, September, with the new director and so forth. That's when it felt like we actually were having meaningful meetings. So my term will have been a little over a year, but we haven't been working on substantive matters. It's been this kind of nauseatingly boring stuff about how we operate, and just getting the train on the tracks is kind of what it feels like we've been doing.
So are we going to get an update from the EDC anytime soon? That was part of the original contracts, is we would be getting some updates, and it's kind of been kind of quiet here. So just curious of
Yep.
where we're at with all that.
Yeah,
I
I
guess I could
think-
ask you during commissioner reports, but
Yeah, and I think we can ask for the director to come in at some point before the end of the year or after the end of the year, whatever works for us in budgeting and everything else and I think that she's going to be also giving reports to the IGC. So we'll have a couple whacks.
Okay,
because there was originally a 1-year funding, and then when the ICG contract went, it became a 2-year, $30,000 a year funding. I'm just curious how everything's going to match up as meeting, when those anniversaries come up, and whether or not we reassess to whether we're going to keep spending money towards this endeavor.
Yeah, and part of their issue was reconciling the paperwork they inherited. So their ability to tell their story is going to be better if we give them a little more time as they're sorting through things. It feels like, and they're working on cash flow projections, existing and future. They're pulling together some really good information that I think will answer your questions. But if we give them, a few more months to kind of sort through that, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, because ultimately it comes down to me, what's the return on investment? What is it that the PUD is really getting
can we,
for its
Uh,
$60,000?
can we carry this over to our next agenda?
Sure.
I'm sure that there will be more to discuss. So let's just hit on the last couple of items under new business.
Melanie, are you ready?
I am, yes. So we have 2 policy updates to our employee handbook for your consideration tonight. The first is related to purchasing clothing for employees. And this update in our policy language would give the general manager the authority to purchase clothing with a PUD logo for employees. And with that, we've found a need to develop some guidelines for purchasing clothing based on duties of certain job positions, and the tasks that go along with those positions, as well as the level of interaction that these employees have with the public. So this would allow us to move forward to develop some of those guidelines. And the second policy update is related to how our training requests are approved. So this change would require approval from the department director, and then would also designate the general manager as the final approver for all trainings, workshops, and conferences. And it would put some more parameters in place for the trainings. So these trainings and workshops have to be related to the employee's position duties or future opportunities at the PUD. And then secondary to that, we also need to clean up the language below about continuing education units. So a lot of times our employees who do have credentials or certifications, they have to get these CEUs. And a lot of times they're associated with trainings that they're already going to. And so in the past, we've had employees request a reimbursement for these CEUs. But our current practice right now is if the CEU is associated with the training, the PUD pays for it up front. So really that just reflects our current process and is just cleaning up the language a little bit. So this is the first look at these policy updates. So I'm bringing it to your attention for discussion and consideration so that we can move forward.
Were you also asking for a motion, or is this just a first touch?
This is the first touch. We will be asking for a motion, but because it's the first touch, we can do the motion at our next meeting.
Is there discussion? Any questions? I think it's pretty straightforward.
Go on consent for the next meeting. Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
yeah, you're seeing heads nod here.
Commissioner Tupper, you're okay with that? Okay. It will be on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, with an entire 5 minutes left, I will,
One quick, if I may. Yeah, I know we want to try and stick to a somewhat of a rigid timeline, but start time is great, but the business, we meet twice a month. The business is the business we need to conduct. If we have to run past 6, I think we need to take whatever conversation or discussion into account, and we can move stuff on to next agendas, that's fine, but I don't want to be constrained to this 3-hour window. I think if we have to take longer than past 6 p.m., the business at hand needs to be dealt with. We should be willing to do that, not look at a hard deadline.
if only we met just twice a month. Part of the reason for trying to enforce a 3-hour deadline is to maintain focus and to get through the business that we have. So as chair of the board, I see that as my responsibility to crack the whip at times. And I appreciate that it doesn't always allow all the discussion that you or Commissioner Randall might like, or staff for that matter, but 3 hours in the afternoon is a long time to meet. And I want to keep this as efficient and business-like as possible, while allowing, in general, ample time for discussion of staff and members of the public. So, but I appreciate your comment.
Yeah, we have 2 business meetings that the public generally count on, that when we deal with major business. Yeah, obviously we have other meetings, but I feel rushed sometimes. And tonight was one of those times I feel a little bit rushed, and I would rather if we took a little more time. It makes me feel more comfortable that we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's. Thank you.
So if there are no further comments, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.